Welcome to the Moms I Know with Sheila Walsh-Denton and Maria Anderson-Farner. Two moms on a mission to reclaim childhood and take you from surviving to thriving on your parenting journey. The Moms I Know is your go-to source for motivation, inspiration, and resources, and real conversation about motherhood and parenting with intention. Thank you for being a part of our community. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Dear intentional, overwhelmed, overworked mother, you're not doing it wrong. You've been conditioned to think that your inadequacy is the reason you can't seem to keep up or experience more ease and joy within motherhood. But nothing could be further from the truth. You aren't failing as a mother. You're mothering within a culture that's misleading and inadequately supporting you. That's by Beth Berry from her new book, Motherwhelmed.
And welcome to the Moms I Know. Sheila, what a perfect quote for our topic today, this idea of summer 2020. What can we do in this place of overwhelm, motherwhelm? I mean, every single mother that we've been talking to these days, we've been having these conversations and we're hearing this just incredible overwhelm, almost paralysis of, this is just too much. How can I handle everything that I'm being asked to handle? I know you've been seeing this with the moms that you're working with as well.
Completely. Everybody is, are we homeschooling in the fall? How is it going to look? What are we doing this summer when everything's locked down? Parks are still closed. Yeah, there is a lot of overwhelm. And I think what Maria and I want to talk about today is what you can do to kind of get your head up a little bit above, kind of some perspective. And I want to continue with another quote from Motherwhelm, this new book I just got. And I'm so excited about this book. It just came out a couple weeks ago because this is why Maria and I are here. And this is the beauty right here. But the most beautiful realization of all was that motherhood has served as the primary vehicle for growth and transformation. I've both been lost and found myself again through motherhood. It has been the backdrop for my heroine's journey. So in that way, right now we are building resilience. We're building character. And I remember, Maria, when we were talking about this episode, if we can go back to the beginning of 2020, and we talked about the year of the rat, and we talked about, taking action of, it's a distillation year. You're figuring out what is important. And so here we are kind of midway through, and it's like, okay, how do we get out of this, the muck? How do we, and there's different ways, and we're going to talk about those, but one of them is taking action.
And also, this idea when we recorded that was pre-COVID-19. It was pre, the racial protests. It was, pre everything that we've been going through these past 6 months now. And when we look back at that, it's so interesting. And we've been seeing so many of these things kind of building, just healthcare systems, education systems, racial and social injustice, everything that we're dealing with, political chaos, we really have been seeing what's coming. And now it's just like you said, distillation of all of this, and it's waking people up, but it is certainly overwhelming us as well. And just in terms of how do we handle this, I love this idea of action. And I think back to when my children were very small. At that time, I was really immersed in feeling a bit of overwhelm, not just as being a young mom, but, looking at environmental challenges. And I remember joining a local environmental group, and it really helped me to have hope for the future. There were things that we could actively and tangibly do to make a difference. And I know that you've been so involved in many different causes over the past few decades. And so, we can look at what we can do individually. We can focus on our own growth and development. And I love that, this whole idea of motherhood as a journey of growth and transformation. I've always said, that raising children is the greatest learning experience of our lives. And so we get to kind of go through our own childhood again. We get to do things differently. We can really focus on these things. And so, right now we've got environmental issues, social issues, racial issues, just all of our local causes within our own local community. There's so many different ways that we can take action. And I wanted to look at this sort of from the different stages of children's development too, because it's going to be very different if you have young children versus sort of the mid-kid years versus the teens. So do you think we can kind of look at all of these things?
Yeah, and so what you're suggesting is like things that the children can do to take action. So that, and in doing so, you're doing it together, and you're making you're making memories, but you're connecting, and then you're I don't know, taking your mind, refocusing. What do we always say? When you get stuck, you refocus, you pivot. Even when you're in the class, I got a message like, what do you do when your child doesn't want to learn anymore, that subject, or they don't want to finish their schoolwork? And it's always, well, you pivot, you go outside. And so this is kind of the same thing. It's just like when you're feeling this overwhelm, go outside, but also take direction and take action, and show the kids that as well. So yeah, what are suggestions for the little ones?
And it's that change, even changing one thing can then set off a whole cascade of different actions. So what we're recommending is that, first you look at yourself and, can you deepen your own meditative journey? Can you add one new thing? Can you be reading different and wider ranging literature, books? Can you be learning about some of the causes that are going on around you and get active? So, definitely that introspection. And certainly our interview with Lisa Dominguez-Abraham really talked about that self-awareness. So we can heighten that. And then as the parent, we were talking earlier about, we're the role models. So our children are watching us. With very young children, we don't need to be lecturing them. We don't need to be preaching to them. We don't need to be changing things. And in fact, I think that we need to shelter them a little bit from what is going on and just keep their childhood as calm, safe, and joyful as possible, because we are helping to shape their future development. So we really want to continue to create an environment for them. And, we've got so many episodes about how to, be these guardians of childhood and protect childhood for the very young children. But the things that we can do there are, spending that time out in nature. We can be gardening with them. We can be doing, we can be recycling, having worm bins. We can be taking walks, whether it's in the neighborhood or in nature, and helping them to observe the cycles of life, the changes that are happening. And we don't need to say much. We can just let them be these observers. We can be reading them stories and telling them stories of overcoming challenges, but the fairy tales, the folk tales, the hero tales from around the world. We can broaden sort of our cultural lens. And so I think with those very young children, it really is sort of what we bring in that's healthy for them, with just that slightly wider lens of the work that we're doing.
And I think an imaginative play, the dress-up box, the scarves, the Sarah silks and stuff like that. Those are a really good jumping off point for, especially summertime. I don't, and it's really, I got to share, Tig just came home last night. It's like, Mom, do we still have the dress-up box? And I'm like, oh, that got packed up in a box already. Sorry. But, it's just so funny that here he is 18 and still looking for the dress-up box.
Oh, I love that. And yes, and on our oldest, even at, when he was a teenager and we were doing crafts with the very young, and he would just join right in. And so, yes, it's never too late to have that happy childhood and to bring up those things that are really open-ended and creative and busy hands, busy minds. And so I love that. With the mid kids, I really think that helping them develop more of a sense of responsibility. So still with, if you're growing your own food, if you're, even if you're in an apartment, you can just have, window boxes and things like that, but taking some personal responsibility for growing some of that, for the recycling, the worm bins, and they're taking on more ownership, listening to them and the ideas that they have, I think is so important at that stage. Obviously, we can try to reduce our car travel. We can be biking more. We can be walking more with our children. We can be taking public transportation. I worked with a family where they were just the masters of public transportation, and the child just learned so much and just loved all forms of that. And so I think that we also need to deepen our thought process around curriculum in these mid-kid years, and especially with literature and with history. looking at the curriculum that we are using and making sure that we are taking into account perspectives from many different viewpoints, that we're bringing in stories from around the world. With the very young children, it's fairy tales, folk tales, hero tales, like I said, from around the world, from different cultures. But with the mid kids, really looking and making sure that the curriculum is not, leaving out huge chunks of our history or of the history of the world, that we're really broadening their view, but through what's meaningful and relevant to them, which is drama, art, music, storytelling, and then of course outside play.
I think that's key to stress, is that what's relevant to them, because oftentimes we think what's relevant to us as the parent teacher, or to us, as the mom, we know best, when in actuality, if you listen, it could be totally different. So giving that the open end, I think, is important. My 11-year-old is reading a lot. She's doing a lot of crafting. She is, she's on the screen a little bit. We limit it. But I let her kind of set those parameters, and then gently remind her, that let's do something else. Again, that pivot piece. So it's not a power struggle. I try to give her the power, but yet educate her to know that this, what is good for your brain, really, making sure that when she is watching the screen, she's wearing her blue blocker glasses and keeping it away from her, and trying not to do it at night, before bedtime. But I'll be honest, it's a little bit of a, something to be aware of.
Well, she's also getting older. And so, I remember, when our children were very young, we didn't have any screen time at all. But then as they got older, bringing it in judiciously and then helping them develop self-discipline around it. And, and
exactly.
we're watching, teenagers are probably going to binge no matter what we say or do. So helping them have some critical thinking skills around what they are watching. And these mid kids, there is some incredible programming out there, and the programming is getting so much more aware as well in terms of, environmental issues, social justice issues, all of these things. And so we can help our children pick and choose what is going to be enriching to them. And then of course, right now with museums being online, there's so much that we can open to their awareness. And so, thinking about that curriculum piece, and, even deepening science through, this observation piece, really doing all types of experiments where we're heightening their powers of observation and their critical thinking skills, and cause and effect. And that's one in these mid-years, asking questions. Well, what do you think? When they come to you with a question, we don't always have to answer them. We don't always have to give them information. One of my favorite quotes, we've used it before, is, that education is not the filling of the bucket, it's the lighting of the fire. We want to inspire them. We don't want to be filling them with information. But this idea of cause and effect, well, what do you think will happen? Not just with the scientific process, but, with social studies types of activities, and with stories that we're reading, and we don't know what's going to happen in the next chapter. It's like, well, what do you think? And when things get tense, or with interactions between people, we can have those discussions. And so we can really deepen their observation and critical thinking skills by asking them questions and just listening to what they come up with. I love how you always talk about when there's conflict with children. Well, what are your ideas here?
Yeah. And I think that that's the beauty, if a lot of parents are home right now, is the conversations, is really strengthening your relationship right now. 2020 is a strengthening year through, it's a building year, it's a strengthening year. And we are having to dig deep, and we are feeling overwhelmed, and we are feeling, I don't want to say screw this, but it's hard. And, but we still are parents, and we still wake up. And I'm reminded of that poem we read a year or two ago in an episode about the invitation. This is an invitation, and how are you going to show up? So, what about for the older teens?
Yeah. And just for those of you who might not have heard that, The Invitation by Oriah Mountain Dreamer, powerful, powerful poem. And, I also, when you were talking about that, in adversity, this is where we gain character. And so, our children, I was talking with a group of moms the other day who were really very, very overwhelmed about, especially about, what to do with this coming school year and just feeling all of this overwhelm. And I asked everybody to just kind of take a deep breath and realize that every mother around the world right now is grappling with this very question of how do I go forth? What decisions do I make for myself, for my family, for my children? And that collective struggle, I mean, think of the diamond, the pressure, out of the coal comes this incredible gem. And so we are in the midst of this incredible pressure cooker. I've seen another parent coach talk about, the COVID pressure cooker. Yes. So we are really strengthening.
Oh, sorry. And I want to share this beautiful quote from the author of Women Who Run with Wolves, Clarissa Pinkola Estes. We all begin the process before we are ready, before we are strong enough, before we know enough. We begin a dialogue with thoughts and feelings that both tickle and thunder within us. We respond before we know how to speak the language, before we know all the answers, and before we know exactly to whom we are speaking. And so it's so powerful because we are in it right now. We didn't ask for this. We didn't want this, but yet we are in this. And our children are with us as well. So that's why we have to be aware. We have to be mindful that they are watching us.
And depending upon your sort of spiritual beliefs, I mean, we're here for a reason at this time. And we have to, like you said, dig deep. And we have that inner strength. I know we have it in us. And we're really being asked to take the time to really clarify this. And so with these teens, you've already said this. This is a time for connection. It's time for conversation. And we look at some of these young people around the world that are doing incredible things. They've taken on, climate change and gun violence and racial injustice and social injustice and economic injustice and, just a myriad of causes, local, global. And so there are these rising energies that are happening that is it's so exciting to see. And also you may have teens who aren't there yet, and that's okay too. Or, we may be taking on different causes, but our children are watching us, and whether they will join in or not, or whether they'll take on their own. I think you and I were talking about making sure that we are having those conversations. So Sheila, I'd love to hear a little bit about, how you're modeling for your children right now with some of the causes that you feel passionate about.
All right. So right now my teens are, they're not as socially active as maybe like I want them to be, or, in the sense for activism. However, they're seeing me. They know that, what I've done. They've seen me pack up my signs and go to the protests. And, I went to Washington, D.C. almost, 3 years ago and everything. And they see the books. They see the books around the house. They're aware. And what I do with those is I share with them, I forward them stuff that I see, articles and stuff like that, tell them to watch this, to read this, and then we discuss it. When they're ready, they will know where to come, for support and everything. But yet I'm not forcing them to do it. I am sharing with them. I'm influencing them of what I think is important, which needs light to be shown on, and answering questions and stuff. However, I don't think you can't force your teens. You want to give them that autonomy. Their self-awareness, their self-autonomy to understand, to think about them for themselves. What is important to them. That being said, though, how we raised them, was kind of what you said, a very worldview where they're well traveled. They've lived in different countries. They are aware. But one thing that they're doing right now, my two teenagers, they're working. They've gotten jobs. And so I feel like that is their piece of taking action and being a little bit uncomfortable for sure. It's making me a little bit uncomfortable because my kids are having to wear masks all day at work. And that's a lot. I think it's a lot of pressure to put on these teenagers again.
You're fostering that independence. And I think that that's where the teens are really looking for that independence, that autonomy. I think that you've also really modeled this listening. And I know with my kids when they were teenagers, we tried to listen. And one of the biggest lessons that I got, I was making sort of an observation about something that they were sharing. And it was coming from a little bit of a place of judgment. And one of them said, Mom, if you're going to be judgmental, we're going to stop telling you these things. And I realized immediately, okay, listen more, talk less.
I've gotten that before. Yes. And that's a quote from, the Hamilton song, listen, type thing. And we've heard that before too.
Right. So I think with the teens, it really is important to listen. And now with my adult children, it's a lot of listening and just trying to be open to all the different perspectives, because, our children might have different perspectives on things, and I might not agree with everything that they say, but I see them really questioning everything and diving deep into everything that's going on right now. And that's heartening to me. And they're sending me articles and podcasts and things to read and listen to. And so it's really interesting to see that. And so I feel as if, and we've talked about this before, that, we fostered that sense of independence and for them to be their own people. And certainly that has come to fruition. And so, just that listening and deepening the conversation. So I love that you said this is the summer of connection. It's the summer of conversation. It's the summer of broadening all of our horizons and hopefully taking action. So, these have been a few little ideas for you. And it's certainly something that we've all been looking at ourselves, and then with the parents that we've been talking with, just listening and hearing and hopefully inspiring people to do what they can. And even if it's just one little thing, there's a beautiful quote about, success. And of course I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's, leaving the world a better place because you have lived. And even in just a garden plot, a flower bed, a healthy child, we can make a difference in the world. I wish I had that at my fingertips. We'll put it in the show notes. Sweet. I'll find it.
Yeah, that's sweet. But it's true. It's just, and just know that we are in this together. And I want to be, I'm going to be fully transparent here, is that Maria and we recorded this episode last week. And when we listened to it, we didn't like it. It didn't resonate with us in the sense that what we want to show here is that, yes, this is hard and we're in it too. But also hopeful. Also this is opportunities. Maybe you've been in a job you don't like, or maybe you realize that you do want to homeschool. I mean, your children, so many parents are saying, I always thought about homeschooling, never thought I would do it, but now I'm getting to do it. And that right there is just like, that means connection. That means stronger families. So if we have stronger families in the future, what is that going to mean for our communities and for our world as a whole? I mean, that right there gives me hope.
Well, thank you for that. So with that, I think we will sign off and hope for a better future. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today for the Moms I Know. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To get the show notes and resources mentioned in today's episode, visit themomsiknow.com. For information on Maria's programs, visit thefutureoffamily.com. And for information on Sheila's programs, visit purplebeatfamily.com. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on iTunes, and follow us on Instagram at The Moms I Know Podcast. Until next time, have a joyful family journey.